And again, I didn't actually understand any of that introduction either. So just quickly, I am a PhD candidate at the University of Western Ontario in Canada. Just a quick show of hands, how many people are actually familiar with Canadian copyright law? Awesome. Okay, so you won't know if I'm wrong or not. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, assuming I can get this going. There we go. Okay, so I'm actually going to talk very quickly about a lot of different things, and hopefully will dovetail nicely with some of the things that have already been said. So I want to talk about why trade deals are not the best place to try and deal with intellectual property rights. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is, the TPP, TTIP, and CETA, which has been up and down in the news crazily over the last couple of days, but does look like it may go through, may not go through. TPP is probably not going to happen, but they still raise a lot of issues that are concerning. So two of the major issues that I want to really talk about are copyright extension and digital rights management, technological protection measures, as being the two big things that make trade deals not the best place to talk about intellectual property rights. So alternatives to trade deals, international instruments like the Berne Convention, WIPO, those sorts of conventions are probably better places to try and come up with global answers for intellectual property rights. Other ways that we can promote culture, I'm going to talk a lot about sui generis rights, and I'm going to talk about, in particular, the Canadian initiatives that might be news to you that work very well in Canada to help promote culture, because of course, if anybody knows about the US cultural juggernaut, it's Canada. So why not a trade deal then? There's two major things here that I want to talk about. First of all, it's basically who's driving the bus. So lobbyists are the ones that are getting the most input into what's going into those deals. Usually they are negotiated by people who are not actually specialists in intellectual property, and that's a problem as well. So if you take a look at the little chart about who's lobbying the most, you'll see that big pharma and media companies are kind of towards the end, but I would suggest that we need to lump the media companies in with telecom and IT, bumping them way up in the list, and in fact, agri and farm with big pharma. So there's a lot of clout going in there from very specialized interests. And of course, the MPAA is one of the biggest lobbyists as far as media goes. So it's important to notice who's sort of driving the bus there. It's also important to notice that it's IP exporters that are controlling a lot of the discussion. So we're talking about the US. So of course it's in their interest to lock things down. We also have secret negotiations. That's one of the other big problems with trade deals as far as IP goes. It creates a lot of mistrust among the public. It also prevents people from having any kind of input. As far as the TPP goes, just as a Canadian example, we were just in the midst of having a big election. The Harper government was on the way out. The Trudeau government was on the way in. As that deal came to its conclusion-ish, the Trudeau government actually had no idea what was in the deal, no more than we did. So that's a big issue. It's hard to negotiate when you don't even know what's on the table. So again, two of the biggest problems with these particular trade deals are copyright extension, so life plus 70, which is of course 20 years longer than the life plus 50 that we know from TRIPS. There's no clear economic advantage or rationale to longer protection. Okay, why does copyright really need to be that much longer than patent? There's no real economic proof that that's a good thing. Richard Watt in New Zealand actually ran some numbers. So works that would be locked into the public or out of the public domain for another 20 years would cost New Zealand about $55 million a year from the TPP. Factoring in GDP and differences in the dollar, that worked out to be about $376 million a year in Canada. So the cost then of copyright extension is actually pretty great. There's also cultural preservation issues. We've already talked a little bit about that this afternoon. So works that are no longer available to the public, those sorts of things drive up both cultural and societal costs. So we have higher costs for public access, licensing, purchasing, library access, educational uses, and so forth. So, and again, digital access, digital locks are an access issue. There are also enforcement costs for developing countries in order to enforce those measures as well. We can also point to the Marrakesh Treaty, which has also come up. So digital locks then can lock down access for differently abled people as well. And again, that's creating a barrier to culture. As we know, access helps to foster both innovation and creativity. Copyright is about that balance between users and creators. So again, access is going to help us with innovation, creation. We want to make sure that the playing field is as level as possible. International instruments help to create that more level playing field, hopefully. One of the other things about trade deals is there is that unlevel playing field. So a developing country may have to give up protecting their culture if they're far more worried about actually providing food and clean water. So there's that dichotomy that wants to be taken into effect. The chart on your right lists the top 10 skills that are going to be necessary in 2015. You'll notice that creativity is number 10. By 2020, with the knowledge economy, that's going to jump up to 3rd place. So again, there's that emphasis on wanting to have access and wanting to foster innovation and creativity. So alternative trade deals, as I've already said, are international instruments. They foster inclusiveness, hopefully, especially for developing countries where we want them to have access to innovative technologies. We also want them to be able to control their own culture, and that's a human rights issue, which I'm happy to talk more about at a later date, but I'm running out of time. So, sui generis rights and initiatives that we have in Canada. So, first of all, we're still with the life plus 50 term for copyright. We have a notice and notice system as opposed to a notice and takedown system when it comes to online infringement. So in the States, of course, you get a notice and the website will simply take it down. In Canada, we've managed to keep it to notice and notice. So if it's not infringing, people can still leave it up. We also have a new Copyright Act as of 2012. That actually comes up for review in 2017, but there was lots of good stuff in that act in 2012 that we're hoping we'll keep a hold of. Section 29 is our fair dealing exception. It includes research, private study, education, parody, or satire. We also have a non-commercial user-generated content exception. That's section 29.21. There's a 4-factor test for that. It has to be non-commercial. For that before, you have to attribute the original author. The original content has to be non-infringing. And the one factor that is problematic is the 4th factor, and that one basically speaks to future monetization by the original work. So that one is a little bit nebulous. We haven't seen it in the courts yet, so it's not 100% sure how that's going to work out. We have the benefit of our Supreme Court that supports a very large and liberal fair dealing policy. They've come out in support of photocopying for educational purposes, and the big case there is the CH case, which was actually the law library doing photocopying for lawyers, and that was considered fair use, so it doesn't get much better than that. We've also had a sampling case where people listening to a sample of music, that's not infringing because that's personal research, personal study in order to buy the music. I wanted to talk really briefly about tax credits in the entertainment industry. If you do a movie in Ontario, you can receive tax money back. This is good for a number of different reasons. It helps us to build our own infrastructure. It helps bring in and give lots of attention to our particular industry. Tatiana Milani from Orphan Black, of course, just won the Emmy. Hopefully some of you are watching that on Netflix or wherever. So those are the sorts of things that tax credits in the entertainment industry can do. They can help to foster our own culture, build our own industry, train people, and foster innovation and creativity. CRTC Talks, that's our regulatory body, has done just a whole bunch of consultations with the public, making TV more accessible and more affordable. We have a cultural heritage consultation that's doing the same thing, hoping to support our cultural industry. And of course, we've had Canadian content rules for many, many years. So television has to carry so much Canadian content as well. And I am out of time. I'm happy to talk about any of these issues further. And I guess the final message I will leave you with is that we really need to make sure that IP issues don't end up in trade deals. Thank you.